Welcome to Psychosynthesis Conversations, your channel for psychospiritual reflections and experiences. And now, to introduce you to our topic for today, here is your host, Kenneth Sørensen.
Welcome back to Psychosynthesis Conversations. In this episode, I'm happy to introduce you to Mats Graffman, a good colleague of mine. Mats is the CEO of HumaNova, one of the largest psychosynthesis organizations in the world, located in Stockholm, Sweden. Mats is a trained psychosynthesis therapist from HumaNova, with additional qualifications in schema therapy, Jeffrey Young, and psychodynamic short-term therapy. Mats has a professional background in the media and internet industry, and as a typical HumaNova student, he pursued a career as a therapist as a second career. In his daily work, Mats today teaches at HumaNova and coordinates and develops HumaNova's educational programs, organizational consulting services, together with HumaNova's principal and head of consulting. He also manages future projects to ensure that HumaNova evolves in the spirit of psychosynthesis, in pace with the times and changes in the surrounding world. If you like the content of this podcast, please help me spread the word of psychosynthesis by liking and subscribing to the channel, and also share it to friends you think would benefit from it. Hi there, and welcome to Psychosynthesis Conversation. Today I have the great joy of speaking to Mats Graffman, who is the CEO of HumaNova. And HumaNova is one of the largest psychosynthesis organizations in the world. And I have actually attended the training in 2002 and 2003, and I was very impressed with the whole setup over there. And I also had the occasion to speak with Mats on several occasions, and I just really enjoy HumaNova's presence and the professionalism they introduce. So it's a great joy for me today to have this conversation with you, Mats, and thank you for joining me here on Psychosynthesis Conversation. So how are you, and how did you come into psychosynthesis?
First, thank you for having me here, and thank you for all the nice words about HumaNova and being a student once upon the time with HumaNova. So I'm grateful to be here. Yeah. So my journey to psychosynthesis actually came through Gestalt therapy. To tell the short story, I was growing up in an actor family. And I was impressed of what's happened back scene, as it's very different from in front of scene. It was an environment I didn't want to be a part of. So I didn't know what to do when I grew up and studied industrial economics, marketing, engineering, and started to work in the largest newspaper in Sweden.
Okay.
And after a couple of years there, I entered a leadership and training program. It was called Leadership Through Personal Development. And I didn't have a clue what I should do there. And then I met Lars Norberg, who was a famous Gestalt therapist in Sweden. And we did polarities, we did share work, we did a lot of strange things for me back then. And my goal after that was to be like Lars Norberg. But of course I can't be Lars, I can only be more Mats.
Yes, indeed.
So that's the moment that get me into all this. And
what time are we here? Are we in late?
Now are we in late 80s?
Oh, late 80s. Okay, that was early.
So I had small children. I couldn't start a new career then. So after 6 or 7 years, then I had the opportunity to start my own training. So then I chose between 3 schools in Stockholm. Then you could choose Gestalt Akademin, or you can choose Psychosynthesis Akademin, or you could choose HumaNova. And I didn't know anything of the schools, so I took the one with the best brochure.
Yes, indeed. They had a very good brochure.
And that's actually that is a message in that, because I was used to one kind of communication, and I had an impression that HumaNova was quality, but of course I didn't know.
Yeah. So when did HumaNova was started in 1996, as far as I recall.
Yeah.
So when did you enter the program?
I entered the program around 1999, something like that. So my goal was to be a leadership and organizational consult, which was the program that already started there. We can talk more about that later. But HumaNova always had a year in personal development as a foundation year.
Yeah.
So after that foundation year, I was beginning to think maybe I should be a therapist instead. And I asked my teacher, maybe you met Pekka Talamo, one of the first teachers at HumaNova, together with Liv. So I asked him, do you think I should be a leadership consultant or a therapist? Because I was confused and everything was new for me.
Yeah.
And then he looked at me from above, because he's very big, and said, what is scariest? And then I know that I should be a therapist, because for me groups are simple, but close meetings 2 and 2 was more challenging that day, maybe not longer.
Yeah. So at that time, was it a 3-year training to therapist?
No, at that time it was 4 years.
Okay.
So I went the 4 years training, and after that I wanted more, so I did a psychodynamic short-term education for 2 years, and then I did the schema therapist education. It's the Jeffrey Young schema.
Okay, yeah.
So I ended up with 3 educations. Yeah.
And yeah, and when we go into the setup for HumaNova, we can also speak a bit about that. But
Yeah.
I'm most interested in now, because it's a big change. You come from was it a marketing position?
Yeah, it was a marketing and position, and then I was CEO at different internet companies and stuff like that.
Yes. So, and then, you come from, you could say you come from the head and go and enters the heart in some way. I'm very fond of my head, so there's nothing wrong with the head. It's very important to have a good head. But
you need both.
Yes, but it is a big transition, going from that world to being psychotherapist. So what was the driving motivation for such a transition?
But I think that when I did this Gestalt therapy education, it was half a year. It was like a new word for me, and I was really hooked. I said, "This is what I'm going to do," and I think that before that, I really enjoyed my work. I enjoyed my life, but this was like, now I know this is it, and that's. Yeah, more than 20 years ago.
Would you call it a calling?
I will call it connection with my heart.
Yeah, okay, yes.
I never used that before, but yeah.
Okay. When you encountered psychosynthesis, and you could have chosen to go to Gestalt instead, but you entered into the psychosynthesis program and were exposed to many theories and experimentation with yourself. And what struck you about psychosynthesis? Why was it something that appealed to you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's a lot of things that still appeals me. I mean, one of the things is the connection to wisdom traditions and all the things that Assagioli brought into psychosynthesis from that. The other is the relational dimension, and it's the acceptance-based dimension. So it's a lot of things actually that I really appreciate. And
But was there anything in particular when you recall? I know it's many years ago, and you started your training, and as far as I remember, HumaNova training, there was the usual setup. There was work with subpersonalities, work with the will, work with the self as observer. There was all these dimensions, and were there any of these that were in particular, wow, yes, this is good?
I think that from the beginning, the whole subpersonality work connected to the frame with wisdom traditions and the self and so on. That was very helpful for me as a person. And during the years, I of course understand more and more of the theory and background and wisdom, but very important for me in the beginning was the practical work with subpersonalities and the synthesis. And I remember I had Christopher Sullivan as a therapist for a while, and he done fantastic work with me on the floor, walking around with all my subpersonalities, and he really pushed my limits in the room and in my mind. So that was fantastic.
When you say a bit about the wisdom traditions, then I also are pretty much interested in the wisdom tradition, and the more I study Assagioli, the more I can see that he also draw on especially Vedanta and the yoga tradition, and especially its understanding of the self. Because when I compare psychosynthesis to other modalities, one of the great differences between the different psychological modalities is that Assagioli's conception of the self is totally different from psychoanalytic thinking and from Jungian thinking, even though there are many similarities. But this understanding that the core identity of you is pure consciousness and will, this was in some way the hook, because I had a meditation practice for many years before, and to see that there was a psychology that actually included some of the deep insight of the East with Western psychotherapy, because he was a psychoanalytic from the very start. But when you talk about the wisdom tradition, is that something similar, or what do you think about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a lot of things that you tell me that makes sense. I have the luck to be married with a yoga teacher. And I have been with her in Mysore. She was was Ashtanga yogi.
Yeah.
So I have been there a couple of times with her and learned that part a little bit by that. But it's also, of course, the Sufism, the Kabbalah, all the other parts that Assagioli was interested in. And I think the genius thing is the blend and the simplicity in his model from this. So he could really boil down everything to the oval diagram.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what's so extremely impressive, I think.
Okay, and then you were part of the training. You became a psychosynthesis therapist, and then at some point you took over HumaNova and became the CEO, and perhaps it was 2004 or something like that, because I remember 2003, 2004, as there was some changes at that point.
Yeah. Peter that founded HumaNova together with Karin Ersund and some other people from Psychosynthesis Academy and Psychosynthesis Institute, they left HumaNova. So one day Peter left the room, and I took over as the managing director 1 year later. So HumaNova was running 1 year without Peter, and then something around 2003 or 2004, I don't really remember.
Yeah,
I took over, and since this we are trying to develop HumaNova as good as possible and make it what we believe it should be.
Yeah. And to the viewers out there that know nothing about HumaNova, I can tell you that I have visited many institutes throughout the world, and I would say that HumaNova is a very special kind. You know, it has this blend of business and it's not totally a business enterprise. Of course, it's a business, like every institute that has to live. But there is a very unique blend of excellence. I would call it excellence, a quality. It's very fine surroundings. There's when you enter the building, you know, it's beautiful surroundings. There's a lot of beauty and harmony. So the physical presence and also the brochures are, you know, are very, very good. And the marketing, the language, and it's really something special, I would say, and especially the people that you meet at HumaNova is. I don't know now how it is now, but when I attended, it was a blend of people from the business world who want to work with people, and then people from the more general world like me that I've never been into business. So can you say something about the culture, or what I'm trying to express here is some kind of the soul of psychosynthesis, and it is a bit different, you know. It has this quality of organizational. My impression was that it was just functioning. There was order, and there was Could you say something about the soul of HumaNova?
Yeah. I'm grateful for all the nice words, but I think one of the ideas when we start with the building is, of course, that it should be a place to come to, and it should be relaxing, harmony. It will be harmony. So we have very nice locations in Stockholm, in Gothenburg, and in the Lund, close to Malmö. And we always in the center of the town, on a nice street, and it's nice. It's a nice furnitures and everything like that. And it's always a kitchen somewhere in the middle, so you can sit down and talk with other students in other classes, and then one of the things that I think is good that make us afford this is that we always have rooms to rent for therapists. So we have rooms in Gothenburg, for instance. We have 7 rooms to rent for therapists, and it's always fully booked because it's a nice location. And it's students, it's psychotherapists, it's the police, it's a lot of people rent by hour rooms.
Yes.
So that's make it a lot of people in always in the buildings.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. I see.
Yeah, that's a very good strategy, and that makes also people go and look at the brochures and make them curious if they are there as a client, for instance. Then they are, where am I?
Yeah.
Yeah. And one lesson is, of course, that people that been clients in psychosynthesis or in other things sometimes end up as a therapist. So it's many things in that is important. And then I think in the culture, we really strive to live like we try to learn others to live. Of course, we don't always successful, but we really strive for a culture that is in the spirit of psychosynthesis. And we have some of the teachers or many teachers been there for over 20 years now.
Yeah.
They are really carrying the culture.
Yeah, and it's a good sign that it's a good place to be if you can keep people, hanging around and develop with the organization.
Yeah. And we have the luck to have a lot of students that after practicing a couple of years or many years, they want to be teachers, and we can pick and choose the right teachers for the future. I think also one thing that we have, which is in the culture, we always had me, since I started as a managing CEO, what we call it, that we also have a principal. So I'm not the principal. And the principal can focus on the teachers, on the students, and don't have to worry about rents and other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. If the viewer out there shall know something about the scope of HumaNova, could you tell a bit how big a staff do you have?
We have first of all, maybe I tell that we have the psychosynthesis nowadays 3-year education.
Yes.
We have something called the Leadership and Organizational Consult education, which is also nearly 3 years.
Yes.
We'll talk more about that. And then actually we have an acceptance commitment therapy education.
Yes.
So if we take all the teachers, we are around 40 teachers for these educations. Some of them teach hundreds of hours every semester, and some of them teach 10 hours. And then we have also a consultancy part of HumaNova that we can talk about later, that do leadership and organizational training out with clients, for instance, the Swedish government, university hospitals, and so on. There we are 20 organizational consulting people that work daily with thousands of people around Sweden. When we meet together, we could be 50 people for Christmas or something like that.
Yeah, that's a big group of people. So to understand, there is this organizational training as what's the name of it?
We call it LOOP. That's short for Leadership and Organizational Consult.
Yes.
So the Leadership and Organizational Program.
And it's partly based on psychosynthesis too. Is that correct?
It's you can say that all our, except the acceptance commitment therapy education, of course, everything is based on the psychosynthesis approach. But both that program and the therapist program also teach short parts of schema therapy, compassion, mindfulness, and so on. So we have, they of course do their client working based on psychosynthesis, but in their education they have an integrative view out on different parts, and we have like a thought that what would Assagioli have integrated if he lived today?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would be, I am a bit curious about how you bring psychosynthesis out to business, because there will always be, some limitations or boundaries. For instance, speaking about a higher self and transpersonal will and stuff like that. How do you address such concept? Are you just let them be in the background, or do you have some kind of specific language where you introduce it in a neutral way? Or
yeah, and it's really depends on what we do. We could do a leadership program for 3 days, and then you can't explain psychosynthesis, but it's always the psychosynthesis approach and the models in the background for the people that give the program. So for instance, when we talk about the self, we talk about meaning and vision and purpose.
yes,
And how to be part of everything in society. So the thing that we try to learn our students is psychosynthesis, and then how do you talk about it with common language?
exactly.
How can you say the same thing and give the same message without the difficult words?
Yeah, and I really understand. And it was actually a very central theme for Assagioli, to be able to translate the philosophy or the vision in different languages according to the people you are with. I think it's so important. And of course, there's no missionary style in psychosynthesis. Everyone is free to think and believe whatever they like. So it is important to meet the clients and the receiver of the training where they are.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing when you don't have 3 years.
Yeah.
You have 3 years, you can make things difficult.
Yes.
Have a week or 2 or a half-year program and a couple of hours in something. So you have to make the same thing but easier to understand.
Yeah. So if we dive into some of the programs, you have this counseling education, 3-year training for psychosynthesis counselor. And if you should say something about what is the primary goal, what do you try to develop in the student?
Yeah. It's so much. No, the structure is that it's first 1 year personal development.
Yeah.
So it's called Bli what you are, and that's the program.
Become who you are, what we may be. I think it's inspired from Piero Ferrucci's book, what we may be.
Of course, and that was the name that we had before my time on this 1 year program. 27 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it's really nearly the same 26 years later. So that's to make a journey through the psychosynthesis oval diagram.
Yeah.
We start with as many others, of course, with the childhood, and then we do subpersonalities, and we do the will, and we do relational, and we do and so on. So the foundation and success is to make that process be real for the students, so they really experience psychosynthesis, not learn it in the head as we talked about,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
in the stomach.
Yeah.
So when we have good teachers on year one, we always have teachers afterwards. And at HumaNova, it's also like that you can only go the first year. First after that, you can apply for the therapist education.
Yeah.
So say, okay, take it easy, focus on yourself. Then you can think about, in a year, you can think about if you should be a therapist.
Yeah.
And that's also good because we have a blend of people that goes there for they want 1 year personal development, and we have people that goes there for they want to be a therapist.
Yeah.
So it's a year where you actually focus on yourself.
Yeah.
And of course, it's mostly experience. It's 2 books, and then it's your own therapy and homework and work with your teachers and groups.
Yeah, I recall there's a lot of work with the other students.
Yeah.
Between trainings.
Yeah, so they have a set of teams that they go in groups of 3 or 4 students. They discuss, and they also work with feedback, and the teachers go out in the groups if it becomes problems and so on, and help them.
Yeah.
That's outside the program, but it's an important thing.
So we have 1 year of, you could call it personal transformation, learning to know yourself by doing the work, confronting shadows, and learning about your will, subpersonalities, and all this. Yeah.
And we say you have to do with yourself what you want to do with others.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when they enter 2 more years to be a therapist, they have first 1 semester with training and working with the classmates and so on, and then the second semester they start with clients.
Yeah.
And it's the same. It's study groups, it's their own therapy, it's supervision, and it's different teachers. They always have a main teacher that follow them 2 years. That is the examining teacher. But then it's coming and going different experts in different subjects. So we have a psychotherapist in sexology, we have someone in systems theory, we have someone in psychosynthesis, Fermangila expert, and the Molly Young Brown expert, and so on.
Exactly. So, yes.
Yeah.
So the 3 year, if we look at it like from above, it's as far as I remember, it's a 3 year training, and is there around 500 hours during the 3 years, as far as I remember.
Yeah, it's something like 500 hours, and then that's of course except study groups, own therapy, and all this. It's the teacher-led part.
How many client hours are they going to have to recall that?
Yeah, that's have been changing over years. First we had, I think, 100, and then we had 60, up and down. In Sweden, it's in different schools, it has been going down a lot. So nowadays, I think we have around 60 hours.
60 hours, yes. So the therapist or the student therapist is going to have 60 hours of therapy with clients. Yeah. So they have that, and they get some supervision on these.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a lot of supervision. It's I think it's 120 hours of supervision or something like that. When we went from 4 years to 3 years, it was a lot of discussion. And one of the arguments why we choose 3 years is the question, how long does it take to be good enough?
Yeah.
Because a lot of our students came back to HumaNova and read specialization in different kinds. Supervision, couple therapy, motivational interview. We have a lot of short courses.
Yeah.
So the reason was our experience was that they are good enough to be good for the clients after 3 years. But you can't stop there. You have continuously work with your knowledge and practice and your supervision. So we focused much more on that.
So yes, so in order to, if you are part of the HumaNova organization, then you have continuous training and supervision. Is there some kind of a certification?
No, there is not an obligation to do it. After they learned it, they always want to do it.
Yeah.
Then in the Psychosynthesis Förbund, that's in Sweden, a part where you can join a community afterwards, there is an authorization.
Yeah.
And to have that authorization, you must have a number of days.
Yeah, I recall, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so in some way you can say that you have chosen, and I think a very important thing here is that there is there's no one that can authorize or say you have to have that many hours of training in order to be a therapist, at least not in Sweden. I don't know, and not even in Norway. So you are actually free to construct your program as you please. Isn't that correct?
That is correct, and that's a big question because the systems are so different in Europe.
Yeah.
So people often compare what can you do there and what can you do there. For instance, you can have university points in Gestalt therapy in Norway. You can't do that in Sweden.
Exactly.
And you can be certified in different systems in Europe for this many hours, but that doesn't exist in Sweden.
Yeah.
So one of the early decisions in HumaNova was we do what we think is good for the clients, for the students, and for HumaNova. So we always try to go our own way.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say to everybody that there's this freedom. You have the freedom to express it in your own way. And of course, there's a lot of organizations in Europe that has joined the EAP, the European Organization for Psychotherapists, and there's much more hours there. But I think it's very important that we adapt psychosynthesis to different cultures, to different countries, and find a way to do it the right way.
Yeah, I think you have to bring psychosynthesis out by your heart, and then hopefully it could be some kind of success.
Yeah, but you can actually say also see how many students you attract and see the work they are doing, and if there's a lot of complaints, then I guess you do a good work. So if we should focus on the other part of your training, a part which I think is very interesting, when I was there, it was called something like organization consultants.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Could you tell a bit about it? Also had this foundation year, but then 2 years of training with people in organizations.
Yeah, that was something that was started really before year 2000. So we had that for over 20 years too. And that's nowadays it looks like you have 7 months or 8 months, a little bit different in personal development. That's called lead yourself.
Yes.
So it's like lead yourself to be able to lead others.
Exactly.
And there we have a lot of more people from the business industry. And that's, of course, the same thing like Bleed and Dare. It's based on the psychosynthesis. You travel through your psychosynthesis process, but we add leadership theories and for instance neuropsychology and things like that are in the mode in that kind of organizations. And then after that you can read a year nowadays in coaching for the students that don't have a coach education. Then they have 1 year training in coaching based on psychosynthesis, and it's also ICF accredited. So they got their international accreditation as a international coach federation. So we accredited the education from that. And so when they have done their personal development, they are able to coach people. They go into 1 year with training in group. And then they read system theory, constellations, transformational leadership, conflict management, group development, team development, and so on. And it's the same approach as the education. First semester, they work with their own group. They do all these kind of experience-based things. And learn how to for instance use nonviolent communication and things like that to be able to handle a group in discussions and communication and a lot of things. And the second semester they go out and do consultancy work with supervision. So then they do some kind of organization and do like a leadership training program, a team development program, conflict management or things like that. And then they have different teachers. The main teacher is our principal, Anna Edengård, who's been doing this for 20 years. She's a extremely recognized organizational consult. She, for instance, supervised all the doctors with the most difficult COVID patients during COVID in Sweden.
Okay.
And she's been in a lot of big organizations with the top management and so on. So there is a lot of experience in HumaNova in this kind of work. And so that's in some way a 3-year program, but some of the students are already coaches and then they don't have to do that and so on. So that the program that also founded the part of HumaNova that is doing leadership training out in organization, because the students, some of them wanted to stay in HumaNova and some of them started this and that part has grown up to 20 people just right now who do the work in reality.
I would like to talk a bit about, the theories, you are using, because this was mind-blowing for me. I was lucky to get Peter's, big Bible of psychosynthesis, and there was a lot of theories there, organization theory. I have never seen anyone else use the egg diagram in that way. So I don't know if you still use it like that, but an organization is like the egg diagram, and the manager is the eye, and there are sub-personalities. This is the different departments in the organization. Could you say a bit about that? Because I think that's really innovative.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we use the egg diagram for the organization or for the group in the same way as for an individual person,
Mm.
and you have a purpose, and you have a vision and mission, and you're part of your environment, and you have.
So the environment becomes the collective unconscious, and the vision mission becomes the higher self, and the superconscious becomes a gift and talents in the organization, unrealized perhaps.
Well, what transpersonal qualities do you want to embrace in this organization?
Mm.
What about harmony? What about so we transform it to that dimension, and so I would say 60-70% of the education is based on psychosynthesis, and then we, in the same way as therapist education, we bring in modern leadership theories and connect that with psychosynthesis and say, okay, transformational leadership and psychosynthesis, how do they connect? So they think in that way.
But I think just, to introduce an idea of the egg diagram into an organization, it cannot, if people take it for granted, it will expand their horizon, it will expand their consciousness, so they are not just looking at profit and the ego levels, but they also see that they have a responsibility for the wider society and doing good in the world. So I think it's very important actually to bring that into business.
Yeah, and I think if you can bring the organization's purpose in the front, they will also earn some money.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you think it the other way, you will always lose. So you have to bring the purpose of the organization in the front, and everybody wants that.
Yeah. So we have the counselor program, we have the organization or the leadership program. What other programs are you doing in?
The third longer program is actually therapist education in acceptance commitment therapy. And that was a strategic decision over like 10 years ago. And that was, we wanted to broaden our knowledge because it was so much that happened when neuropsychology come up, when acceptance-based new therapies come up. I mean, compassion-focused therapy, mindfulness-based therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, and so on. And the whole area of psychotherapy changed from CBT, old CBT to new CBT, and from old psychodynamic to new relational psychodynamic. We wanted to be a school that was in time with the development.
Yeah.
So we already had this teacher that was an expert in acceptance commitment therapy doing small parts of that. So we had the right teacher. And then we started the 2-year program very early because we saw that acceptance commitment therapy was growing outside Europe. And we understand that this will be very big in Sweden, which it is now 10 years later.
Yeah.
And there was an idea that to learn that, to have teachers in that program together with the psychosynthesis teachers will make us wiser.
Yeah.
So there was a blend of teachers from that word with the psychosynthesis word, and we learned a lot about all these new systems that was coming around 2010 and so on in Sweden. And we bring in the best teachers in Sweden from the universities and from other places in this education.
Could you say a bit about, I've never heard about it before, so and perhaps the viewers have never heard it. So what are the basic principles?
Yeah. It's very it's an acceptance-based circular Eastern influenced psychology, and it's that we bring that in is, of course, acceptance, commitment therapy. Acceptance is awareness,
Yes.
and commitment is will. So they have the same, the active and passive dimension.
Yes.
But they have a hexagon with 6. They have awareness, direction. So they have like a model with 6 points, but one part of the model is active, one part of the model is passive. It's Stephen Hayes who formed this psychology. He's really understanding all the things that he knew the wisdom traditions.
Yeah.
Based on the same foundation, and also based on the CBT. So he transformed old school CBT to Eastern kind of CBT.
Yeah.
My way to tell it. People would probably tell it another way.
Yeah.
And the thing is that on that education, we have a lot of students that will want to work in the Swedish hospital care. So that's an education that a lot of the hospitals want to have. And most of our students in psychosynthesis work outside the hospital system in Sweden.
Yes.
So that's also a way to meet other kind of students. The students there normally work in social care or hospitals and so on. Yeah.
So I know also from your website that you have other type of perhaps smaller add-ons, relationship therapist but when you combine it all, how many students do you have in a year? Do you have the number for that?
Yeah, we have on the longer programs that we talked about now, we have around 300, 350 every semester. But if you we have a lot of small 1-day seminars, 1-hour seminars, 3-day training, after your therapist education training. Then we have, that's a part of the strategy to have a lot of small things before, because we want to attract. So maybe we meet 3,000, 4,000 people with our teachers in the short programs. And then if you add on how many the consultancy group meet, and we meet 10,000 or something every year.
That's huge numbers. It's totally extraordinary. It's really huge numbers, I don't think that anyone out there has done anything like that. And so the next question that emerges, why are you so successful?
Sometimes we are successful, sometimes we have challenges.
Yes, of course.
No, but I think actually that we went our own way and tried to follow the development of the Swedish development of what's happening in psychotherapy and in organization and leadership programs. And then I think maybe the most important thing is that we have happy students. Students that think that nowadays we have very, very few students that think they have problem with their education. So we got a lot of students through old students. that's. I mean, if you don't is successfully with that, you're never successful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So happy students.
And then I know we had a pre-conversation a couple of months ago, and you said something that really struck me, and it was that you are good at finding people on the internet, and now we are back at your old profession. So you spoke about that you have 2 people who only focus on online marketing and trying to bring people into the psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I have the background of marketing and internet, and nowadays I said HumaNova have the nicest brochure, and that was a part of the success before internet, because that was really a good brochure.
Yeah.
And we send out thousands of brochures that days, but today nobody read on papers. So we started early with building our website so the search engine can find us.
Yeah.
Nowadays we have 1.5 people working with the text and the website and the marketing, and we have some expert helping us to make sure that if you search on the internet therapist education Malmö, then we should be in the first 3.
Yeah.
Because if you're not in the first 3 when you search, nobody look at you.
No.
It's a little bit hard, but
that's the fact.
That's the fact.
Yeah.
So we actually have not our own system, but a system so we can see around 200 search words, so meanings, every day if we lose or gain in position.
Ah, yes.
So we can see, for instance, have a motivational interview training for 3 days. We want to have a license in that. Then we can say, okay, today we are number 2. Now we dropped 2 positions. We have to do something. So we every week we see, do we win or lose position, or can we do anything? And then you must write the right things on your homepage. You have to have dates for the training. You have to have a lot of things. And that's the cheapest way. Otherwise, you have to buy a lot of ads.
Yeah, exactly.
So can you really manage your homepage with some help of technical and people that are good at that? Then people find you.
Yeah.
So that's a part of the success. It's a success. Yeah.
And are there any? Have you any? If you should look at the future, what are your milestones ahead? How do you see HumaNova evolves in the future?
Yeah. No, I think that's our mission right now is to keep the quality. And have the right teachers and organizational consultings, because that part is growing and growing, and then reach out to more people, because the purpose of HumaNova is of course to make group and peoples become more who they are. It's the mission of HumaNova to try to meet a lot of people and with simple words tell them what psychosynthesis can bring.
As far as I recall, you also had some activities in Finland, but you didn't mention Finland.
No, actually, we had an office in Finland, and we had an office in Norway, in Oslo. We started up with training in Finland in Finlandssvenska when the Finnish people that speak Swedish.
Yeah.
A lot of classes. then we started to try in Finnish, and then we give up. That was too much to us.
Yeah.
So actually, we left Finland 10 years ago. In Norway, there is still a HumaNova, but there is another group of people owning HumaNova Norway, and they have 1 or 2 classes for the moment, and they are in Oslo, but they are legally a separate organization than HumaNova Sweden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I see that some organizations are now trying out online activities, online education. Is that something you have considered?
Yeah, we did a little bit more online during COVID. We have a motivational interview training that is pre-played online. We tried that. That was a success, but it's not a success now. It's very old-fashioned now. We do a couple of online live, like you and me now, training.
Yeah.
For instance, we have a 5-day course in acceptance commitment therapy, because then we can bring people from whole Sweden. But that's 3 or 4 or 5 online live courses every year. So it's a very small part. I think that's a challenge for everybody in the future, because the online will expand, and the online will be cheaper than live training. And you have to have live training in psychosynthesis. You can't, according to what we think, do it online. So I think there is a lot of thinking to do, how you manage your mix between online and physical meeting in the future, because people will be more and more used to online, and we have to adapt in some way to that in the future. But for now, HumaNova have made a decision that we will do all psychosynthesis training and everything like that as much as possible for the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Finally, I would say before we will do a little exercise, as we do, I would just like to say that are there anything we haven't touched on? Is there anything you would like to address before we close up our conversation?
No, I think I was happy to hear you talking about HumaNova, and it sounds like a success, but of course there have been up and downs.
Of course, there is up and down, especially, that's my opinion, especially when you work with also the lower unconscious, and you really want to be an organization that helps people transform some of the toughest aspect of yourself. Then your organization, your group will be challenged, because this is how we learn to deal with it. There will be conflicts internally. I think it's simply impossible not to have conflicts if you enter this area of human development, because these conflict is your work. You have to show the world that you can handle your own stuff individually and collectively in the group. So of course there's ups and downs. I don't think it can be anything else.
Yeah.
And then we are now to our final thing. I always invite my guests to do an exercise that they think is really essential for showing what psychosynthesis can do, and I will be your willing subject.
That was surprise. I didn't prepare that.
No, but 15 minutes or so, just so people can have a feel of it. It could be a meditation. It could be a short subpersonality work. Anything you just feel inclined to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we do 2 short things.
Okay.
Was it 15 minutes or was it?
Yeah, around 15 minutes.
Yeah. We do 2 short things because I sometimes when I have seminars, I do the very short things because when we have the longer educations, you can sit and meditate for half an hour and reach something. But there is also so nice to have these small, short things to connect with the theory or psychosynthesis in some way.
Exactly.
Can you stand up, Kenneth, and be in the picture?
I can stand up. So.
This one is very difficult for many people.
Okay. I hope I manage.
I stand close to the computer so you hear me. I see, but you need to stand. If you take your finger and then lower it so you can see it from above.
Yes.
So like this, so you can see it from above, and then you should turn it clockwise like that. So you see, so if you see the watch, your finger go like the watch.
Yes.
Can you see it from above?
Yes, I can see it.
Good. Then you continue to do this movement. It's very important. And then you rise your finger up and continue the same way and continue the same way and continue the same way up to the roof.
Yes.
And then you look at the finger. In what direction does it go?
Yeah, it goes upwards.
It goes the other way.
Ah, yes.
It doesn't go clockwise.
That's right. But it's like some kind of a spiral movement.
Yeah.
Yes, it goes the other way. That's right.
But you moved your fingers the same way, Kenneth.
Yes.
What happened?
I changed my perspective.
That's it.
Yeah.
What it's about with disidentification and everything.
Yes, exactly. Change the perspective.
Change the perspective. You see it another way. But you did the same thing.
Exactly. Just change the perspective.
Change the perspective.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant short.
Very, very good.
I believe.
Yes. Doing the same thing, but with a new perspective.
I'm sad it's not my idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
You had 2 things. That was one of the things. You know, I have just to remind you about, an exercise about changing perspectives. I have my clients standing on a chair sometimes, when I want them to change perspectives, I ask them to stand upon a chair and look down on their problems. And it's really, really helpful to move the body and do that kind of role-based therapy.
Yeah. Good.
Yes.
We have some fun now.
And now we have a second exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you can do what we normally do. You can close your eyes. Sit. So just take a couple of seconds and focus on your breath. So you can feel feet to the ground. You can feel your chair. And you can let go of what we talked about and just focus on your breath. So for a while, see if you can catch a thought, and just a short thought that shows up in your mind. And to that one, you just say, thank you. And then catch another thought and say, thank you. And catch another thought. And say, thank you. And I will now leave you in silence for about 1 minute, and you continue to catch a thought and say, thank you. So let's say thank you for all the thanking, and in your own way, just bring you back to the room. How was that for you, Kenneth?
Well, what I noticed was that when I start focusing on seeing the thoughts, then the thoughts disappear. Actually, bringing attention that, the attention that I have to say thank you to a thought made, then there suddenly were no thoughts. Then there started emerging a commentator within my head saying there's no thoughts. Okay, then I said thank you to the commentator that commented on no thoughts. Yeah. And then after that, there was most just silence. So it's a powerful technique to stop the thoughts and being present in the silence.
Could be. Maybe it's also so that you are experienced meditator.
Very.
For some people, there is a lot of thoughts.
Yeah. But I I do some kind of a similar technique where When I experience an emotion, I just say, perhaps I say sadness, and then let go of it. And if I have a thought that is full of worry, I just say worry, and then let it go. And this had the same effect, calming the psychological environment. So you, become more present and here and now.
Yeah. And sometimes when I do this, when I try to, for instance, talk about acceptance, there is a lot of ideas about acceptance, but all these small self-critical thoughts and things, to take care of them with empathy is for most people very difficult. So if you don't do it so complex, you just so, I was talking so much today, thank you.
Yes.
So when I think to try to simplify and not and be able to do it on the bus for 5 minutes on the way home from work. Then you don't make it so theoretical, although I try to go to the core. Just try to be empathic, whatever happens in your life, to yourself.
I agree. And it's a wonderful place to stop our conversation. I just want to say so much thank you for your time and your ability to explain what's going on in Sweden. And I have a lot of admiration for what you're doing and bringing psychosynthesis out to so many people. I think that's not a small thing. So thank you so much for your showing up here and spreading the wisdom of you and HumaNova.
Then I say thank you.
Good. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Psychosynthesis Conversations. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and help us to spread the wisdom.